in case anyone hasn't remembered my name. It is embarrassed like me to look at everybody's belly.
I shortened mine.
My name is Karen Einstein, and I'm really excited to be here and to be moderating this panel with these three wonderful women. And the panel today is on diversity, and what we'd like to talk about a little bit is how, as publishers and authors and people in design and layout, bookbinding, etc., anybody in the publishing industry can contribute to the conversation on what is diversity and how can we in the publishing industry contribute to this incredibly important conversation in our country right now. So it was fun when we were getting the panel together. We realized, like, wow, there are a lot of varieties on defining diversity. And Gina has a fantastic project called Diversity is a Verb. And when I first saw that, I was like, what? We need to talk grammar. I'm an English teacher, so I saw that. And I realized Ezra Pound did say, keep the language fresh, and he was really, I don't really agree with his politics, but he was a brilliant poet. Even though I can't understand, a good 50% of what he wrote. But when I saw diversity as a verb, that was the first thing that came to my mind, like, oh, this is interesting. So I'll introduce our panelists very briefly. I could easily spend 45 minutes on each person because of the incredible things that they've been doing with their lives, but I'll keep it down to 2 sentences so that we can get into the panel. So Gina Humber is an educator and a speaker, and she's nationally sought after in terms of the work that she's doing that we're going to discuss with on the theme of diversity. She published in 2015 a brilliant children's book called It's All Good. And the characters in the children's book represent characters from all different, there's a character in a wheelchair and characters from different religions, different ethnicities, etc. So we'll talk a little bit more with Gina as we go on. I highly recommend looking at her website. It's full of fantastic links that bring you all over into incredible areas of the whole concept of diversity in the States. Then we have Grace Stevens, who is an inspirational speaker. And I first met Grace when she had published her first book, and I can't wait to read her second book. Her first book is No, Maybe, Yes. And it was one of those books that, as working in IPNE, one of the great things and one of the horrible things is I have to read a lot that I don't want to read. And so I looked at Grace's book, and I couldn't put it down. So both Grace and Gina have written about authenticity. The subtitle of your book is Living, yes, maybe now? Okay. A book about self-acceptance and diversity. And Grace is we're so much more than gender is a lot of what Grace is working on. And then we have Ginny Towler, who has had an exciting, really exciting international and legal career. Jenny speaks 5 languages, 2 of which are languages that are not, like a lot of us speak Spanish and French and the other Latin languages, but Ginny speaks languages used in the Philippines and Thailand, where she first went as a Peace Corps volunteer and then ended up staying for a number of years. And that experience really informed a lot of what she feels about diversity and what is diversity. So first of all, what I'd like to know, because diversity is a verb, that one caught me off my feet. I love it. Before we start asking the panelists a couple of questions, how would you define diversity? Before we start this, it's funny because when we were having our panel discussion, I realized that one of the things, I spent 20 years living in Europe, and one of the things that I found really shocking when I came back here is you really have to walk on eggshells so much in New England in terms of what you say and what you intend and what the receiver understands from your intention. And I don't know why it's like that, but it was one of the first major culture shock things that I got. And when we were discussing diversity, I ran into that. What words, I'm a linguist, so what words trigger what feelings in the conversation about who we are and how we're similar and how we're different. So diversity, anyone? Oh, don't talk, shout it once. Okay, Pam, I'm going with you first because you're wearing this beautiful hat. Just off the top of your head.
Diversity I think the first time I remember hearing it a couple of years ago was probably in response to color,
Okay,
skin color.
okay,
And then later it went to gender identification. But the first time I ran across it was how many African American children are in children's books, for instance, in children's literature.
okay,
But
great.
and just even using the term, I'm old enough to have grown up with the word Negro, which was okay, and then black, and then African American, and now black maybe, and it's like I have to ask my daughters, you know, what word, you know, can I say today that's not going to upset somebody?
Yep.
That maybe within a particular culture, they can use certain words, but I can't.
Yep,
Because
yep,
I'm white.
yep, that's a good
So-
point.
I'd like to, I need to learn more.
Great, thanks Pam. By the way, this is Pam Fenner, she's one of the founders, and I'm gonna take her hat.
Yeah.
So thanks, Pam. Okay, yeah, Lisa?
For me, diversity is all about hearing voices that are not the mainstream default voices that we
Okay.
tend to hear in media and in literature. So it's having room for all voices and a diversity of voices and a multiplicity of experiences, and being able to experience the lived experience of others
Mhm.
through art.
Okay, great, thanks. Charlotte?
And to me, I think by human nature, we're sort of tribal, or we look for people who are like ourselves. And to me, diversity is cutting across the superficial, physical manifestations of our tribe to realize the humanity that's in all of us.
Great, okay,
How's
thanks.
that?
As a former teacher, I think what struck me in a diverse classroom is that it's not just color, it's not just gender. There's social, there's ability, there's ethnic, and it goes on and on. And the best classrooms that work well are ones that value everybody.
Okay, fantastic. Anyone else? Shall I pick on someone? Kate?
Well, Lisa said a lot of what I was going to say, but I think it's sort of diversity. It's about having many perspectives and understanding that there's more than one lens that we can look through to see something, and that our lens is not necessarily, it's not so much right or wrong, but it's not the only lens that's worth looking through, and we can. It's sort of that ability to say, okay, it's not only possible to put myself in someone else's shoes, but it's worthwhile. I can learn something. I might learn something about you. I might learn something about me and how this world works better if we understand some different things that maybe we might not have understood before.
Wow.
So that's
Great.
philosophical.
As a writer, I think of writing a character and becoming that character, and that I can write a character as a Native American, and I could write a character as a black person, and I could write a character as a different gender person. All of that is possible to me as a writer. And I don't know whether it comes from living past lives or what.
That was one of our questions, so thanks for bringing that up. Anyone else? I mean, that was great. Okay, so,
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm
I was
sorry.
literally coming. So I mean, if you think about, without diversity, it's very boring. I mean, you think about life. You know, if it were sunny every day, you'd say, oh my God, you know, give me some clouds. And I was just thinking of a box of Crayola crayons. I mean, do you remember they used to have just a small box and then they got bigger and bigger?
Oh, right, yeah.
All the different colors. I mean, diversity adds to life. It adds, you know, spice. I mean, it adds so much to everything. So,
okay, great, thank you. I'm gonna turn to our specialists here. for more time. Before we begin, though, I forgot to mention, I worked in education for decades, and my take on diversity is multiple intelligence theory from Howard Gardner. So basically, my take on diversity is that different people across genders and ethnicities and religions think in structure the way that they learn and express themselves in different ways. So that's kind of my take.
Can
Okay,
I
yeah,
say one more thing? I remember years ago, there was somebody who said to me, and if there's no diversity, people don't even realize that other things exist. Somebody said to me, this was somebody from the Midwest, she said, until I went to college, I didn't know that there was any religion other than Lutheran, she said.
Yeah,
And I
I
said,
remember
what?
that
I mean, I grew up in New York City, and but she was like shocked. And so it's important to for life.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, one quick question, just a raise of hands so we know who we have here. People who write, authors? Okay, editors? Designers or layout artists, bookbinders, publishers? Okay, and, okay, cool. So, what is diversity for all three of you? What is diversity, and how can those of us in the independent publishing community contribute to the dialogue? Gina?
Well, I thought everybody gave a great poignant point on what diversity is, so I'm not going to defer very much from what you've already said. But the idea of bringing it to our books is what's very important to me, which is why as an author I included those with special needs. I didn't see a lot of children's books with the main characters who were Asian or who were of Latino descent or discussed issues such as melanin. You know, I didn't see those who have a disability, whether it be physical or something else, be able to tell their stories. So I think it's important as authors that we take that time to tell everyone's story. And the reason why, just really quickly, why I feel it's important is because, say as a parent, right, if you only have a certain kind of book, then how does your child learn to adapt to what we've spoken about? I mean, not to say that all of us in terms of age, but all of us here look very experienced. So it took some time. It took some time.
You didn't say mature.
Yeah. I have some, but we have some experience, and we evolved in how we thought about one another. But we want to pass that down to our youth. And how do you do that if there aren't stories that depict those images that they need to see? How do we do that if there aren't stories that talk about people's different experiences? You know, and I see a lot of parents who will say to me, oh, you know, I think the diversity is beautiful and I think diversity is great, but my child at this present moment, you know, the issue of special needs or melanin, they don't need to know that right now. And so then when should they know it? Should they know it in college when you're finding out that nobody's Lutheran, you know, like there are other people that are not Lutheran? When should you find that out? The ability for us to be compassionate towards one another and the ability for us to have humanity should not be an age of when we get older. It should happen actually at a very young age where we begin to teach those very important moralities one to another. And I think that's what's missing, the humanity of it all. You know, I should be able to look at Karen and this is my sister, right? I shouldn't be able to look at Karen and go, oh, this is a European American. Yes, our experiences are different, but at the end of the day, you know, it's like in 9/11, because I'm from New York. When 9/11 happened, no one considered, I don't want to deal with you because you're Latino, or you're poor, or you're overweight. We looked at someone and showed some humanity. So why do we have to wait till there's an emergency? Why do we have to wait till somebody's bleeding and dying before we realize the importance of one another?
You know, it's really interesting. I don't know if it's time to make a comment, but what you were saying made me think of something. Being a very experienced person, I had never seen what do you say, a mentally deficient person or what was called a retarded person or anyone with Downs when I was growing up, because they were all put in institutions. And then shortly after I moved to Newburyport, the institutions were closed and people came out. And I was really amazed looking around saying, oh my goodness, there are an awful lot of different people here I never saw before. And then I went to work in the field with developmentally delayed people. But what you were saying brought that right to mind. It was like, wow, they hit them. They hit them.
Good point, yeah.
Very good points.
Grace, what is diversity?
Yes, I'm fine.
And how can the publishing community contribute best to the dialogue?
Okay, stop me when I get too long. So on the way out, I put a couple of charts on the back table along with copies of my latest blog. But I have a picture of concentric circles of the primary and secondary areas of diversity. So we've mentioned so many different areas of diversity. We've talked about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. We've talked about physical characteristics. We talk about, are you married? Have you been in the military? Diversity can be just about any aspect of you, any aspect of me. Yet, as Charlotte pointed out, we usually want to hang out with people like us. And how do we define people like us? Now, when we talk about diversity, I also made a little chart that says it's hard to talk about diversity with, I took a picture of C-3PO, you remember Star Wars, C-3PO? So it's a mnemonic that says, when you talk about diversity, consider prejudice, privilege, power, and oppression. I love in this room that we've talked about diversity is interesting. Diversity is how do we learn from each other. When you take a deep breath and you see somebody different in one of a myriad of ways, what's the first thought that comes into your mind? And is your mind fighting with your heart about diversity? The heart, where does compassion come from? Here or here? So what is really going on in terms of that diversity? And then within a culture, when you see yourself in some way that's diverse, what emotion is taking over for you? And for a lot of us, and me particular as a transgender woman, it's fear. What will I lose if I live truly to myself? I was married for 25 years. I have 3 children, adult children, 2 grandchildren. Could I dare be different, be true to myself? And what would my losses will be? There are so many people in the trans world that are abandoned by their families because they're different, because somehow the culture says there's something bad about being different, being who you are. In the publishing world, when I wrote my book and tried to find an agent and tried to find a publisher, we don't need another trans book. Okay? And it's kind of like, oh, but my book is better than every other book. And in fact, so my, thank you. My book is No Maybe Yes, Living My Truth. Living My Truth. But it's actually a book that's actually about you, and it implores you to live your truth. And the No Maybe Yes is for the years of denial, the 50 years of denial, then the years of questioning, then the years of self-acceptance. So it's really, how do you get stories out that, if you read my story, if I tell you my story, and I do this weekly on Huffington, with the framework that I offer, drop your own story in. And the other thing about different areas of diversity is the intersections. We're never one thing. We talked about if we didn't have diversity, life would be boring, right? Okay?
Be like the Eloy. Remember that?
In the time machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. right, there are many science fiction movies with that diversity of what's going on. We won't even talk about politics now. But the idea is, even when yourself, if I asked you to introduce yourself, I'd like to know all your intersections. Nobody's just one thing. Each of us are so diverse. I'll kind of stop there for now and move on to Jim. Thanks, Jim. Sorry.
Where to begin? I guess I have to tell a little bit about my story. And this woman here who talked about things being hidden. There is so much about this country that we don't know that is hidden from all of us. And we would be a totally different country if a lot of these things that have been hidden came to light. And I want to applaud this gentleman in the corner here, who's the only male besides the videographer. Because it is the power structure to which he belongs that needs to be here. Because they're the ones in charge and they're the ones that are keeping things hidden. So the women here, and this man here, who are willing to hear that truth of what needs to be exposed, what needs to be aired. We need your voices. We all have something that isn't listened to. We all, everybody. So to me, writing is about exposing what is hidden. As a writer, I have tried for 30 years to have a voice, excuse me, in Hollywood. My work is everywhere. But because I demand that my characters be authentic, you don't see my work. You see bastardizations of my characters in feature films, in television, on a Broadway play. I sued someone and lost, and I understand as a lawyer that the right to copy is copyright. But when can we let authentic stories be heard? And it's writers like you, and publishers like you, and people who care about the truth. We need you, because you're going to change society by allowing people like us, not allowing, because we're going to do it anyway, but hearing. You're hearing us, and you're willing to listen. And that, to me, is what writing is about. It's sharing your authentic self with other people who might want to hear it, who are open to hearing it. And what we're going to find out in every single story that each of us has to tell is that, hey, I can relate. That's what we're going to find out. Because guess what? We're human beings. We're all the same. So I've taken a lot of my frustrations as a writer and as someone who Hollywood has tried to keep quiet. They know my name. And this isn't an ego thing with me, because, you know, it's really not. It's the characters that I care about. You don't see my picture, and I'm still fighting with them about whether or not I even want to be on screen. Because it's not about me. It's about my characters. It's about the authenticity of my characters, the world that I want people to be a part of. Who I am is irrelevant. But in this culture where smiling and looking good and pictures and all this, in this culture, that means a lot. How you present yourself depicts how, or depends how people are going to receive you. And even in my own culture, it's going to, you know, is my hair nice? Am I smiling right? You know, what color am I? So I have so many worlds to navigate through. I just said, you know what, I'm taking myself out of the equation. I'll let my characters speak for themselves, because that's what I really care about. But what I entreat all of you to do is, if you are going to put people of other ethnicities in your novels, in your books, in your talks, speak with authenticity. How do you speak with authenticity? You have to talk to the people you're writing about. Because Hollywood's not doing that. They're just stereotyping. And that's why I had to write this book. I had to write characters that cannot be stereotyped. Because that's what we do in this country. We stereotype. How many people look at me and have a value judgment just based upon how I look? I have this hair, I have this, no one would know that I speak 5 or 6 languages, that I've lived overseas, that I probably know more about opera than most people in this room. You know, no one would know that. Because you're gonna see a stereotype, you're gonna have a value judgment just based on my appearance, which isn't fair. It's not fair, because I'm gonna judge you the same way, probably. So as writers, I just want us to speak with authenticity, do the research. Do you have a black friend? No, I'm serious. Do you have someone you could speak intimately with? You know? So to really, because we don't have a monopoly on our culture, but we do need to start having a monopoly on our authentic culture. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Okay, I do have a few more questions, but I'm guessing that your questions are probably better than mine. So.
I would like to comment on what you were saying, because as soon as you started talking about it, I thought of the difference between American television and British television, and I'm not an Anglophile, whatever, in any way, but the British TV is better. It is better, and I remember watching a show so many decades ago on Channel 2, and they showed the woman who's washing the floor with her thumbnail, getting that little piece of grit or grime off the floor. And it's just that difference. All of American television, everybody has to be beautiful and have perfectly straight teeth and be coiffed and be young. I mean, it really is deplorable, that difference. Thank you.
I have to just comment on that because I worked for the British Council for 20 years, and I am a Anglophile in that sense. And I used to always say to my friends, oh, you might be able to respond to this. Well, of course you do nothing, but they're brilliant theater, music, you know. It's like they live on a tiny little rainy island. It's all rocky, and it's in the north, you know.
They have to be more civilized.
Well, no, they have a culture of, I can't remember what the word is, but it's, you know, you go over to your friend's house and in groups, and you do theater and drama and music at night. It's like what you do at night. So, well, that and drink in the pubs, but yeah. but their theater is incredible. Okay.
I liked what Gina said on our Ask the Experts show. You know, you have to go into the community, eat the food, and listen to the music.
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
Yeah, great. Lisa?
This is sort of more of a comment, but one of the things that frustrates me greatly is how we as a culture continue to segregate things written by authors of non-white backgrounds in the African American literature shelf. Why isn't it just in science fiction?
Yeah.
Why do we have to say this is, you know, Native American literature? It's literature. And because we are all human and we want many of the same things, not all of the same things, you know, I don't want to have to go to a specialty shelf and see that particular intersection represented when really it's a murder mystery, it's a science fiction, it's, you know, and that's one of the things that has been very frustrating to me in trying to celebrate diversity and recommend books for my friends to read, is finding them, because they're hard to find. So I guess my question is, what strategies would you all have for readers, and I'm going to identify myself as a reader, not a writer, how do readers find authentic stories of other experiences to then recommend? How do we find them?